Miss Leslie Arnett from Laramie County Schools today. Leslie, why don't you introduce yourself and show us what you're working on?
As Preston said, my name is Leslie Arnett. I work at Laramie County School District number 1 in the big city of Cheyenne, Wyoming. And I've had this interesting journey lately with Teams and with SharePoint and with PowerApps and Flow. It all started about maybe no more than 6 months ago. I had a meeting, a weekly meeting with my boss, and we were in a regular conversation, and he just kind of mentioned nonchalantly, he said, well, we might want to start to learn a little bit about PowerApps and Flow because we might be seeing some projects come down our way. And so I decided to take his advice and run with it. So that's just what I did. I started digging mostly into Microsoft Ignite and started watching the videos on the series that's posted on the web. And really, that's what kickstarted this whole thing and decided on this digital transformation journey. And all of a sudden, it was just kind of interesting how things developed. All of a sudden, these different projects started popping up and different requests from different departments and asking if we could do certain things. And so then I would do my due diligence and research it, and sure enough, would find a solution with using one or several of these products, either together or separately. This particular one that I'm going to show you today is, give you a simple overview of the business use case scenario. We have a department called Facilities, and they have a process where if someone needs to add a door, or maybe they need to add some security to that door, or different things of that nature, they have these tasks that need to be accomplished. And in this particular case, they have a core group of people of roughly 4 to 5 people, and each individual handles a certain component of that request, and it needs to bounce back and forth between each individual. Some, person A might start it off, and then it goes to they finish it, and it goes to person B, and then person B is done, it goes back to person A, and then A is done, it goes back to C. So it just bounces all over the place like that, where different people have to approve things and be aware of when certain circumstances have been completed. So I had them draw a flow, just kind of a diagram, if you will, of their process, and so I could kind of piece together and logically think through their process and be familiarized with it, because essentially I wanted to build a tool where I didn't want to spend all this time in creating this tool that I thought would be awesome, because of course I'd be biased towards it because I created it. I wanted to make sure it'd be something that they would actually use and could function easily in. So I encourage you, if you do take on these tasks, that you do keep the end user, definitely keep them in mind when you're putting these things together. So this first page, if you can see my screen, is I dumped everything into Teams. So the first thing I did was I started a team. They had come up with a name for the project, which is STAR. I forget now what it stands for, something about security, something or other requests. And so I created the team, and this is a wonderful place to house everything, to keep everything together. So it's just easy access. You don't have to worry about where anything is and how do I get there. It's all right here. So, of course, as everyone probably knows, when you build a team, you get a free SharePoint site with each one. So I utilize that SharePoint site in order to make my list. So I use my list to obviously keep track of the data that's entered into the apps that I've built. So this just gives you a quick visual of all the information that's in this list. It's quite extensive. There's a lot of neat features in this list that I've incorporated, such as triggering a flow, some conditional formatting, just so things pop. And so it's quite an extensive list. I don't know about you, but I wouldn't want to have to work out of this list and have to scroll all the time to update different things. So what better solution than to create an app?
Real quick before you jump to
yes.
that, Leslie,
Yep.
You did some things in this list that not everybody's familiar with around the color coding, different things like that. How did you learn to do that?
Actually, I through Microsoft Ignite and also through some different videos I've watched. It's there's a docs.microsoft.com website that talks about for SharePoint, I should say, for customization and column formatting. And I'd be happy to put that link in the chat when I'm done presenting. I can put those links. I have some key links that I used because I will say I can't take credit for all this. I did take some examples from some key people, and I didn't copy them exactly, but it definitely pointed me in the right direction and got me going and got things moving. So I didn't create everything by myself. I certainly utilized tools that I learned from other people. And
I think one of the things that you mentioned too was you didn't necessarily try to become an expert before you started, but instead you watched a lot of these videos and learned these things over a period of time, correct?
Right. I certainly don't consider myself an expert. It's a continuously learning process. And I think that's what's most exciting about it, because even if you thought you learned everything about PowerApps, which I don't know how you could, there's going to be something new that comes up. Just recently, on that point, actually, with components. I was playing with components today, and not to get too far off subject, but that's an amazing new feature that PowerApps has added that is just going to be a game changer. If I can get that to work the way I want it to, and just make things a lot more efficient and faster to build new apps. So a lot of you might see this list and you're thinking, how are you going to, one thing that I did do was I crammed everything from this list and made it operate in an app that is only one screen. And this is where I hopefully will wow and amaze a lot of people, because you're probably thinking, there's no way you could do that. That's a lot of information. I don't know how many columns there are, but there are numerous columns of data that is tracked here. And I will show you it is actually possible to cram everything into one screen. So this is what is called a star management app. This is what the managers, the key personnel would function in when they're working with different requests for their active job list. So as you can see on this side, this is actually a gallery right here. And it just takes the key information that I've pulled that I want them to see, maybe the priority level and different things that's very important. That's, just a quick view of that job. And to view it, I've set up a tab format. So basically, this is actually, if you have ever built an app, this is the component that is in this piece right here is just one form. It's one single form, which are all the fields that I wanted to pull into this app, but they only show at certain times. Basically, for example, in this case, location button, I only want these fields to show when the location button is selected. So when I click the job info button, my fields change and show just the ones that I want to see for that category, and so on and so forth. And so I've divided that list into essentially 4 different categories. So there's some magical sprinkles that happen with those components that I'd be happy to discuss on a side subject that we don't have time today to really get into that, I don't think. But another key component that I added were, if you notice, some of these buttons had changed, will change depending on values that are actually entered into or not entered into this form. Because in this process, certain things need to happen and certain things need to be requested for approval at certain stages. So I don't want them to be able to use buttons while they're grayed out. I don't want them to be able to use those yet because it's not ready. This job isn't ready for any of these processes yet, but it is ready for mechanics to be reviewed. So what do you have to do to request for a protocol? I have logic set up in here, so that way, if this is no longer blank, which means they've approved or rejected the process, whatever the case may be, then it's ready to be requested for protocol. And of course, you don't need to request mechanics because it's already been done. And same thing with protocol. If that information is entered, and if this is, I'm going to say this is no. Of course, I maybe didn't get that set up right. I actually have it set up to where if these 2 values are filled in, and this is a certain response, if it's a no, for example, you should be able to request for a quote. I will say I was playing with it today, so I think I might have broke it. So I need to go back in and fix it. But this just kind of gives you an example of the different things that you can do inside your app. I was able to fit all of that information in one form. It's essentially a gallery and a form with a bunch of buttons and setting up different logic for certain things to happen at certain cases. And also another key feature, I don't think I had this in place when I spoke with you, Preston. I added this other feature too to tell you if flow is running, because there's another huge component behind this is flow. So obviously a lot of approval flows are happening and different things of that nature to keep things going in the right direction. And so what I noticed in my last demo with the group is it seemed like there was maybe some confusion. Well, how do we know where we are in the process? Who's got the ball, so to speak? And so this will actually give you the status of where the flow is, what flow is running, what the status is, and what was the last one completed, if that's available. So in this case, for example, there's a flow running on this record right here that is in process, and it's actually requesting for a quote.
That is fantastic.
Yeah, that's kind of it in a nutshell. There is another app that I set up that goes along with this, and if you click this button, it'll open a website, but I'm just going to go to the page where it's displayed. When initially they wanted this built, they wanted to be able to, it was understood that outside users outside of that core group needed to be able to submit a request, which meant we didn't want them to have access to all that information on that list. They only needed access to certain key pieces of information. So I built this app. It's just a simple detail screen and an edit screen, which, obviously you have your gallery again, and then you can create a new request, which creates an edit form, and you can't submit it until you at least enter certain pieces of information. And you can submit that way, and it will create a new record, or you can review a record that's there, certain pieces that aren't, are simply what you would have entered in anyway. But it doesn't give them any edit features because we didn't want them to have the ability to go in and change something. So we removed all the buttons and hid them from them so they couldn't edit. So all you can do in this app is add a record and maybe look at an existing one, and you can search for it by building as well. So and something I also didn't have in here in place, because Preston, when you and I talked, you said, well, maybe you could do a search option. There is one thing I wanted to mention for people, and maybe they'll fix this in the long run, I don't know, but there is a data delegation issue that I ran into. That's a whole nother subject. Essentially, when you're working with a search feature, a sort, a filter inside PowerApps, you're using a certain kind of column, like a choice column, a lookup column, or a calculated column, you're going to have some issues with building the logic in your search. So you have to, I had a workaround created because this column that runs for the buildings, they had me change it to, instead of where you type it in, they wanted it as a choice. So that kind of broke things for me. I had to refix everything to change it from a regular field to a choice field. But then it changed. I can't really have a search without an issue with data delegation, which isn't a big deal if you have a small list of data. But if your data starts to grow and becomes kind of big, it could crash essentially and have issues. So the workaround I created was a simple flow. I just created a column that you can't see in the SharePoint site, and then I built a flow that's a recurrence flow that every hour it just goes in and looks at the new field that I made, and if it's blank, then I take the value from that choice field and plug it into that standard text column field, so that way they match. And so then all I have to do is, it's no longer a calculated column or anything like that. I can just do I can create a sort and a filter. So I actually have a filter built in here right now where it filters by alphabetically in ascending order. Since I don't really have the real estate to put a search in just yet, I don't know if it's necessary. But anyway, just a quick workaround to solve that issue for data delegation. That's kind of it in a nutshell.
Yeah, no, this is fantastic. You did a great job.
Let's see here.
Yeah, so I think this is some really neat sort of improvements and things that you made to this, and it sounds like you continue to improve this over time as you work on it. So is this the first app that you've built?
Actually, I built my first app was an athletic trainer app, which was a little simpler. But now that and that was a few months ago. Now that I go back to look at that after I'm building this thing, I see it just seems kind of silly. It was like, well, I could do way better than that now. It was very simple and elementary, if you will. And I also didn't mention too, because we had this discussion before, how long it really took to build this. Yes, it is a continually work in progress because I always find new things and cool things to add to it and some new features. But in all, it probably took a total of 2 days total to build the app, where the most of the time was spent is preparation. You want to definitely communicate with your end users and really nail down what you're going to put in that list. Whether you use a SharePoint list or if it's going to be a common data service or a database, if you do a SQL connection, whatever the case may be, make sure you hammer out that data and get it ironed out, because I ran into, I think it was a couple of days ago that, like I said, they had me change a regular field to a choice field and it broke everything. It totally broke my stuff. So I had to go back and fix the logic and redo a couple of things. But so just a minor heart attack, but got it back up and running with better features in the end. So.
And is this your full-time job, Leslie, this building apps?
No, this is my free time. I actually do integration with other larger software that we use. We use outside vendors for a lot of things. And so I build the integration between our databases to talk to their software. And I also work on several other projects and work within the district, not necessarily all app-based. Some are just flow-based in SharePoint. But it seems to be where my job is heading. It's developing and turning into this I guess one-stop shop. If you need something, go talk to Leslie, see if she can build it. Is kind of where it's going. So.
Yeah, and so that fits very well with sort of, I feel like, what I've been on the soapbox about. Rapid integration specialist, that type of an approach to things. Is this something that you've found intriguing and you want to continue doing it, or have you gotten into it and went, man, this is just kind of a waste of my time?
I look forward to coming to work every day, because I lose some sleep sometimes actually thinking of different things I can do or maybe try. And I get very excited because I get to try different things and you see your results right away. And I'm very blessed with the environment I work in. If I need something, I just say, hey, if I need a license, I just say, hey, I need a license for this, like the Flow Plan 2, and I needed that license and it was just nothing for them to make sure I got that. And same thing with PowerApps Plan 2, they set me up with that, just so they're more than happy to give me the tools I need to experiment and really maybe come up with some really awesome solutions. And I just love the developing process. And you might build something, like I said, I'm going to go back to that old app, the first app I built, and reinvent it. So I'm looking forward to that and utilizing what I've learned and through this process and continue to learn. It's just a never-ending learning process, and to me, that's very exciting.
Yeah, and this is great. This is really what I was hoping for, Leslie, was for you to be able to come on and show people this is something that you can pick up and learn and do. You've done a fantastic job here, and as far as just demoing what you've built, and we appreciate it. And I would encourage anyone else who has things like this that you'd be interested in sharing. We all appreciate it. I'm sure you guys can relate better to the things that Leslie is showing you and how she's solving problems than just me telling you about what's possible. And so to Narose and Kimberly, hopefully this is what we'll be chatting about a little bit tomorrow, is some of these types of technologies and how we can take this a little bit further with the other little project we've been talking about. So Leslie, I truly appreciate you coming on, and we will continue to feature other people as they come in. There are a few questions in the IM window around how the data is set up in SharePoint around like permissioning or using Office 365 groups and then storing that list in a group site and some of that type of stuff. Is there anything on that you care to talk about at all?
That's what's nice about having SharePoint in the background. And there are some key things you have to remember too when you're setting up apps. With the teams, yes, you have your team members, which by default have access to in SharePoint. But you know, you have to make sure that you have to set up the permissions so that everything, and I apologize, I don't know off the top of my head what to call it, but I just had to make sure that everybody had editable rights to the list when I created it, because if they go into make a change, it won't add it to the list if they don't have editing rights to the list. So I guess for me, that was the biggest thing, is making sure that whoever's going to use the app has editable rights, because it does capture their user information. And so if that user doesn't match on who's able to edit that list, you need to make sure to add them as a user to edit.
Excellent. Thank you. All right, guys, I appreciate it. I'm going to stop the recording now.